This concludes the first part of our session. If I can get our 4 speakers back up, actually, you can take a seat up there. I might just hold this, actually. And is MJ around? Did we find MJ Rosenberg? I'm not sure we did. We'll press on anyway because I'm conscious of time. So we've got some microphones around the place. If you've got a question, put your hand up, please. I'm just going to kick things off myself from some of the notes I've been taking. The thing I've gotten from all of your speeches so far, it's about making things available. Freedom, making pictures available, thoughts available. Joshua, you said personal info, which is what we see a lot of on Twitter, for example, can be valuable info. You're putting a lot of trust in the people, aren't you, in the end? But I'll ask this to you, Joshua. Because it's great to have access to pictures, it's great to have access to information, to everything, but it's what people do with it in the end, isn't it? And you're really putting a lot of trust in your people to do the right thing with it.
Sure, I think it's, any media system that expands beyond a very small circle of people is going to have to be based on trusting people you don't know. We have created trust systems in traditional media organizations that are based upon reputation that often work the vast majority of the time, sometimes don't work. And I think that we are very early on in the stage of evolving what sort of persistent trust mechanisms we're going to see online. I think that 5 years from now we're going to have much better ways of figuring out what is trustworthy and what is not. As it is now, for a lot of things that appear in social environments, a lot of our ideas about trust are based on watching what other people are doing. The same way that when you're in a social environment, if you don't know someone, you can learn a lot by watching how other people interact with that person. If there's something that is spread far and wide and something that other people are commenting on, other people who seem to be trustworthy themselves and they seem to be agreeing with it, that is by no means a foolproof system, as we've seen through any number of times when rumors have spread through Twitter.
Well, this is the thing. Sorry to interrupt you. Something as simple as Wikipedia, which you can. If you do a Google search on anything, there's a good chance that there'll be a Wikipedia hit somewhere in the first 5 Google hits or something like that.
Right.
I mean, are we going to reach a point where something like Wikipedia is a quotable source, is attributable? And is that the right thing to happen?
Well, I guess it depends what you mean by is a quotable source. I quote Wikipedia all the time.
For example, let's say...
That's up to you.
It is. No, it's good. Let's say I'm on air. For example, I'm on air. I have a computer. I have... computer wires coming through, and I can say, right, Reuters is now reporting that Israel has launched an attack, or that Palestinian fighters have fired into Israel, or whatever it is. We attribute Reuters, we attribute AP until we know. What about if I see something interesting on Wikipedia, or I get my facts, I start looking to it? Joy, go ahead.
I just want to clarify one point about Wikipedia. There is no primary work. It's not allowed on Wikipedia. Quoting Wikipedia is a little bit strange. You can quote it in the context of trying to use their work as a summary, but every single thing in Wikipedia has to be cited, and there are rigorous rules about what you can cite. So if you are a journalist, and this is just a recommendation because I think some people have started to quote Wikipedia a little bit too much. If you find something on Wikipedia, you should click through to the citation and go to the original source, the primary source. And if you find something that's not cited, you should remove it, put it in the talk page, and say, we need a citation for this. And so Wikinews is separate, but Wikipedia itself is not supposed to be a primary source. And so I think that's kind of a red herring, because some journalists then come and say, oh, but anybody could edit it. But that's the whole point of the citation rigor in Wikipedia. Just
No, thank you for doing that. Anyone got some questions? We've got a question here. Can we get a microphone to the lady in the red over there? And then you, Sarah, after that.
Thank you. Listening to both Joshua and to Mohamed, it strikes me that new media seems to be creating very distinct content in news. From what you said, Joshua, the orientation in the United States seems to be more and more towards leisure, how-to, consumer, while what you're saying, Mohamed, is that here in the Middle East, where news itself has been hard to come by, new media seems to be triggering a renaissance or an evolution into fundamental new media mechanisms by which to bring hard news. And I would like you both to comment on that, please.
Mohamed, go ahead. Hit your microphone there. That's it.
Right. So I think it's when we talk about what's going on in the West in terms of demand media and these sort of companies and all the content that's being created on the soft side of things. I think we've ended up in this place where the data has taken us, right? And this is something that worries me when we start looking at data, because all this, where we've ended up in, with the way many front pages of many news websites look, they've been developed because people have been following the data of what people want and what people click through and what articles interest them. And then they've taken the editorial sort of prerogative and they've almost put it aside. And they've said, well, let's look at what the data is telling us and put that on our front page and make that, the headlines, right? So, if you look at CNN, for example, they've changed the way they've put their news on their front page. And if you go to their front page, there's a very slim picking of actual news, and the rest of it is all human interest, features, soft type of stuff. And that's all, I suspect, driven by the data, because people have seen, well, lots of people are going to these articles talking about some celebrity or, some other topic. And I think, there should be a red flag going up in newsrooms, and people should be saying, wait, the data might tell us this, but, what happens when we interrogate that data a bit more? Because I think what we'll find is that all that traffic coming through doesn't necessarily translate into the audience who's coming to your website for the purpose that they're coming to. So lots of them are coming there because they found a link on, dig.com or Twitter or somewhere else. And they probably, there's a large chance they may never come back to your website. So now what we've done is we've taken our editorial prerogative, we've thrown it out, and we're catering for these pass-by users. And I think that's the wrong thing to do. I think the right thing for us to do is to actually say, well, this is, the reason why people would come to an Al Jazeera or BBC or a CNN is because they trust our editorial judgment. And that's why they come to our website. So I think it's finding that balance of saying, well, our business is news and hard news. And we're making these decisions, right? So we're choosing what the news should be, and that's why people pay us. But in the end, we can't just say, well, let's just go to what people are clicking on, because what people are clicking on may just tell us a different story to what people want from us and what our audience wants from us.
I think it's very difficult whenever you talk about the internet broadly, or social media, or new media slightly more narrowly, to really come to any sort of summative conclusions. I mean, there's the internet that I spend my time looking at and reading and participating in, and there are an infinite number of other internets out there that I have no contact with. So it's really difficult to say that the new media being produced in the United States leans one way or the other, because there are entire universes of every type within it. So I think that what I was trying to get at was that there are a number of businesses that are trying to build profitable models based on churning out an awful lot of comparatively low quality, comparatively low newsiness content, and thus far it's worked out pretty well for them, and that's the kind of content that you would have seen at the end of a news broadcast, in the back section of a newspaper, in the softer sections. The business model for that kind of work, I think, is a lot clearer than the business model that's going to support, what we might term quality journalism, or however you want to define it. Watchdog coverage of governments, watchdog coverage of corporations, investigative work. Those areas are a lot harder to build a business model around, which is why I think, in the United States at least, and a lot of other countries as well, you're starting to see a real interest in, removing the profit model entirely from that sector and turning it over to nonprofits, foundations, other folks who will do the work out of a civic interest as opposed to making it part of their business.
So you had a question?
Yes. I was rather riveted by Joshua Benton's figures of young folks spending, somewhere between 7 and 12 minutes a month on the on newspapers, as against 7
That's all
hours?
people,
Is
not
it
just
7 hours a day or something?
7 hours a month for Facebook, and 8 to 12 minutes on average for an
That's
American
right.
newspaper.
Now this is a vast difference, and I'm wondering what the social consequences of that are. We've listened to Mr. Rosenberg talking about the wonderful enlightenment of the young Jewish community in the United States as a result of the new media. But I do, I'm much encouraged to hear that. On the other hand, I do wonder what is happening with the decline of the old media. Now, I come from South Africa, and just in the last few days, the Washington Post has announced that it's closing its Johannesburg bureau. That means that it won't be covering Southern Africa anymore. Now, I do, in my experience, Middle America particularly hasn't been hugely enlightened about Africa, or the Middle East for that matter. And I'm wondering whether these 24-year-old bloggers are going to supplant and supplement and fill in that enormous gap. And ultimately, I wonder, on the one hand, we hear about the wonderful awakening of the young Jewish community in the United States. How does that compare with what strikes me as being the rise of Sarah Palin and the Tea Party movement? And to what extent is the news vacuum responsible for this know-nothing surge in your country?
I'm going to set aside Sarah Palin for a moment. I'll try to get to it eventually. I think one statistical note, since you mentioned that number, that is the number for time spent on American newspaper sites, not news sites. So if you're going to CNN.com, if you're going to BBCnews.com, or you're going to Al Jazeera, that would not count in that mechanism. So just to clarify that. The numbers that, I think the direction we're generally moving towards is going to be, people are going to know more about fewer things. As opposed to a traditional American news experience, whether it's a newspaper or the evening news, the goal of that was to give you a taste of a whole bunch of different things. You would be exposed to a little bit of news, probably a very little bit of news from Africa, a bit of news from Europe, a bit of news about your local city council, a bit of news about your governor. And it was a skimming of all those things. I think now people are going to be more self-selecting, and they're going to have areas where they are very well informed, but there are going to be fewer areas on average. And there are a number of reasons for this. One is that, with the capacity for search, there is less of a social cost for being ignorant of one particular area, I think, because people feel that they can repair that with a few minutes of Googling and reading if they have a reason to fill that information. And in addition, I think that we've always, as a culture, overestimated how much people were really absorbing all that information. There are a whole lot of people who read the newspaper, but they really just wanted the comics, they wanted to do the crossword puzzle, or they just cared about the sports score from the previous night. The numbers that I have seen have indicated that there is not some sort of mass growth of ignorance among the American people American young people because they're spending all their time on Facebook. This is a concern that people have raised with every new form of technology that has come along. We heard it with television. We heard it with radio back in the day. We heard it with video games. At every stage, there is this concern that the youth of America are going to suddenly become, vapid ignoramuses. We could argue about whether that ever happened or not. Is a separate thing. Regarding the Sarah Palin, I think it is not at all that people are not exposed to news. It's that they're exposed to kinds of news that are purposely intended to promote that sort of work. I mean, Sarah Palin has an enormous media platform that various news companies, such as Fox and others, are happy to provide to her. So I don't think that it's a lack of engagement with news. It's actually, it's the access to that sort of news that enables something like Sarah Palin, but also enables something like Barack Obama. Basically, it's a new set of tools that are available that are ideologically neutral. They can be used to advance ideas all across the spectrum.
I'll take one more question in just a moment. I just want to bring MJ. Yep. Or just hit your microphone, would you, MJ? Just the green button there. The green button.
At the bottom of the base.
Yeah, hear it now?
There we go.
Okay. I think that the question's a very good one because the internet, to a certain extent, is a mixed blessing. The attention span of young people, even before the internet became widespread, was dropping all the time. Even children's television shows. I know my kids grew up with all these programs, Sesame Street, Electric Company, all these shows that was just flashing things at them. That's the way you teach the alphabet. That's the way you teach learning. All based on the fact that children have a short attention span, but also encouraging that in a way. I have I have two sons, one in early 30s, one in his 20s. The one in his 20s is a very successful media person up in New York. His business is media. He is on the radio, on the largest hip-hop, that's rap music radio station in the country, 4 hours every morning, has millions of listeners, and I'm sure he's not going to be watching this because he doesn't watch anything. He does not know what's going on in the world other than a world that he chooses to follow. In other words, he knows everything that's going on in his hip-hop community, which are rap musicians and a whole world that revolves around rap music. He knows everything. He knows everything about sports, and particular sports. But the other day, I saw he tweeted to his fans, he wrote, "Guess what I'm going to be discussing on the show tomorrow?" So I'm his dad, I can tweet back. If I tweeted back just a regular person, I said, "The possibilities of a conservative-liberal merger in Britain?" And he thought that was hilarious because he didn't know what I was talking about. Yeah, American, obviously like the internet, when you talk about America, you can't really generalize. I mean, there are really smart people. The 24-year-olds I'm talking about are as smart as could be. Not to say my son isn't smart. He's just not up on current events. But there is a whole other America out there. And that is what I would call this Sarah Palin America. This America that feels that and I'll put it the way I believe it, that the election of a black president took away their country. And they're not a majority of Americans. I don't think they'll ever elect a president of the United States, and the demographic trends are all running against them. You know, America is now minority white. I mean, it's going to be pretty soon. Those people are losing their footing, and as a result, they're getting angrier and angrier and louder, but we can't think that Fox News is the voice of America, but it is a voice. And it is dangerous because, you know, when you're dealing with people who show up at events that the president speaks at with guns, and when they proudly, you know, hate the president so much, it's dangerous. But my last comment on that people who are not Americans may not know this, because it's not news in other parts of the world. The United States is spending less and less on education all the time. Whereas people from third world countries are devoted to education, and whereas you'll talk to any person, if I talk to the cab driver outside here, he will tell me what his goals are in terms of studying and learning. In America, we're defunding the schools. America as a nation has made the decision that it will not pay 1 cent more in taxes to educate their young people. And as a result, and we're seeing the results in, so then you have the internet that comes along, and they can just click from one thing to another and really learn nothing about anything except who Beyonce is dating. So I think, you know, it's a really, so I mean, with every technology there are two sides. There's definitely a downside to the internet, but it's just building on a problem that existed before the internet did.
I'm going to jump in there because we'll take one more question, but I do like the point that you've made, MJ, that basically that we've got a buffet now, haven't we? And that you can, with your Twitter or your Facebook, you can choose what you follow, and you're following that very narrow band. Whereas you could open a newspaper and read something brand new, which you knew nothing about. I think it's a really good point. One more question, right there.
Right here.
Oh.
Hi. I'd like to ask the panelists about the different stages of the internet and how, you know, we've moved on from Web 1.0 on to Web 2.0, basically moving away from just looking at information and more interacting with it. And I just recently came from a conference in Lebanon that talked about what will Web 3.0 look like, and whether the concept of a widget technology, which is, if you look at BBC's website, for example, customizing what you really want to interact with, like maybe in MJ's son's case, the hip hop scene. And this is what people choose, this is what an audience chooses to interact with, whether this would be a startup for Web 3.0.
Who wants to field that one? Joy?
So I think the best thing about the internet is that everything that's successful on the internet wasn't anticipated before it became successful. And so I think anyone who predicts the future of the internet is, by definition, usually wrong. But I think there are some really important trends that are already obvious. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. But the shift from web to mobile is extreme and super significant. Japan, the biggest social network site, Mixi, since the last several years, the web traffic is decreasing. More than half of the traffic is mobile. More and more of the money is being made on mobile. I think Japan is leading the way. In the Middle East, you find huge penetration of mobile. In most countries, other than the United States and a couple of others, most communication is now happening on mobile and not on the internet. So the web is dying. And together with the web dying, I think mobile is growing. There will be certain applications that the web will use, but it will be like big computers. It's not going to be a personal device anymore, I think. So that, and all the numbers indicate this. This isn't anything new, but it's something that people forget a little bit. And I do think that the video thing I'm talking about is absolutely significant, because it's been locked up by this sort of, just this horrible patent sort of mishmash